The sun hung mercilessly in the cloudless Arizona sky as Owen Young squinted against the blinding glare. It was 1873, and the harsh landscape of the territory seemed determined to claim another victim. Owen had been riding for 3 days straight, his canteen running dangerously low as he made his way from Tucson to the small mining settlement of Copperwood. That's when he saw her, a crumpled form against the red earth, motionless beneath the punishing midday heat. "Whoa there, Samson," Owen murmured, pulling back on the reins of his dun-colored stallion. The horse snorted, hooves pawing nervously at the ground as they approached the figure. From a distance, Owen had thought it might be an animal or perhaps an abandoned bundle of clothing. But as he drew closer, the unmistakable shape of a woman came into focus. He dismounted quickly, boots landing with a soft thud in the dirt. Approaching cautiously, years on the frontier had taught him that not everything was as it seemed. He knelt beside the woman. Her face was sunburned and covered in a fine layer of dust, dark hair matted against her forehead. Her dress, once a fine calico by the looks of it, was torn and dirty. But what struck Owen most was the pronounced swell of her belly beneath the fabric. She was with child, and from the size of her, quite far along. "Madam," Owen called, gently touching her shoulder. No response. He pressed 2 fingers against the side of her neck, relieved to feel a pulse, though weak and fluttering like a trapped bird. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. A soft moan escaped her cracked lips. Without hesitation, Owen uncorked his canteen and carefully lifted her head. "Here now, drink some water." Nice and slow, he tipped the canteen slightly, letting a small amount of water moisten her lips. At the touch of liquid, her eyes opened halfway, deep brown eyes that seemed to struggle to focus on his face. "That's it," he encouraged as she took a small sip, then another. "Not too fast now. My baby," she whispered, her voice as dry as the desert surrounding them. Her hand moved weakly to her swollen abdomen. "Don't you worry about that now," Owen said, his voice gentler than most would expect from a man of his rugged appearance. "First, we need to get you out of this heat." Carefully stowing his canteen, Owen slid one arm under her shoulders and the other beneath her knees. He lifted her as gently as possible, surprised at how light she felt despite her condition. Her head rolled against his chest, and he could feel the heat radiating from her skin, a dangerous sign of prolonged exposure. "I'm going to put you on my horse," he explained as he carried her. "Samson here is steady as they come. He'll get us to town without any fuss." The woman's eyes fluttered open again, confusion evident in her gaze. Who are you?" "Name's Owen Young, madam. I'm taking you to Copperwood. There's a doctor there who can look after you proper." With practiced ease, Owen managed to mount Samson while still cradling the woman in his arms. Once settled, he arranged her more comfortably across his lap, one arm securely around her to prevent her from falling. "Thank you," she murmured, before her eyes closed again. "What's your name, madam?" Owen asked, but she had already slipped back into unconsciousness. Adjusting his hat to better shield her face from the sun, Owen clicked his tongue and urged Samson forward. The mining town was still a good 4 hours' ride away, and the woman needed medical attention sooner rather than later. As they rode, Owen found himself wondering about her. What was a pregnant woman doing alone in the desert? Where had she come from? And what had driven her to such desperate circumstances? The steady rhythm of Samson's hooves kicked up small clouds of dust as they made their way across the harsh terrain. Owen periodically stopped to give the woman small sips of water, carefully rationing what remained in his canteen. Each time, she would wake just enough to swallow before drifting away again. As the afternoon wore on, the woman stirred more frequently. During one such moment, she opened her eyes fully for the first time, looking up at Owen with more clarity than before. "Julia," she said suddenly. "Pardon, my name. It's Julia. Julia Blackburn." Her voice was stronger now, though still raspy from dehydration. "Well, Miss Julia," Owen replied. "Or is it Mrs.?" A shadow crossed her face. "Mrs. But my husband is gone." Owen nodded, not pressing for details. Out here, death was a common companion, and grief a private matter. "Mrs. Blackburn, then. We're making good time to Copperwood. Should be there before sundown." Julia's hand moved to her belly again. "The baby. I was afraid." "That little one seems determined," Owen assured her. "Stubborn, like its mama must be, to have survived out here. A ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. Yes, stubborn like its mother. Her eyes drifted to the landscape around them. I don't remember how I got here. I was traveling on the stagecoach to California, and then. Her brow furrowed with the effort of recollection. Rest now, Owen suggested. Stories can wait until you're feeling stronger. Julia's eyes met his, gratitude evident in their depths. You saved us. I don't know how to thank you. No thanks needed, madam. Anyone would have done the same. But they both knew that wasn't necessarily true. The West was as cruel as it was beautiful, and not every traveler would stop for a stranger in need. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the distant outline of Copperwood came into view. The small mining town wasn't much to look at, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a main street, with scattered homes and tents spreading outward like ripples in a pond. But to Owen and his charge, it represented safety and salvation. Julia had drifted in and out of consciousness during the journey, but as they approached the town, she became more alert. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice stronger than it had been earlier. "Copperwood," Owen replied. "Small place, but they've got a decent doctor. Fellow named Pearson. Patched me up once after a run-in with some cattle rustlers." As they rode down the main street, Owen was aware of the curious stares from townsfolk. A man carrying an unconscious pregnant woman was bound to cause a stir in a place where gossip was as valuable as gold dust. He guided Samson directly to a modest building with a weathered sign that read, "Dr. Thomas Pearson, Physician." Stopping in front, Owen carefully dismounted while still supporting Julia, then lifted her into his arms again. The door to the doctor's office swung open before Owen could knock, revealing a middle-aged man with spectacles and a beard streaked with gray. "Owen Young," the doctor said, surprise evident in his voice. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon. And with company, I see. Found her out in the desert. Document unconscious, dehydrated. She's with child." Dr. Pearson's professional demeanor immediately took over. "Bring her in, quickly now." The doctor's office was small but clean, with an examination table in the center and shelves lined with bottles and medical instruments. Owen gently laid Julia on the table as Dr. Pearson began his examination. "How long was she out there, do you reckon?" the doctor asked, checking Julia's pulse. "Can't say for certain. Found her about 4 hours ride east of here. No sign of others around." Julia's eyes opened at the sound of their voices. "The stagecoach," she said weakly. "We were attacked. I ran. I don't remember how far or for how long." Dr. Pearson nodded gravely. "Bandits, most likely. They've been hitting the stage lines with increasing frequency." He turned his attention back to Julia. "Mrs. Blackburn." "Julia Blackburn." "Mrs. Blackburn, I'm going to examine you and your baby now. Mr. Young, if you wouldn't mind stepping outside." "No," Julia said suddenly, her hand reaching out to grasp Owen's wrist. "Please stay. I don't know anyone else here." Owen looked to the doctor, who shrugged slightly. "As you wish, madam. Owen, you can stay, but give us some room to work." For the next hour, Dr. Pearson thoroughly examined Julia, checking her vital signs and the condition of her unborn child. Owen remained by the door, hat in hand, feeling somewhat out of place but unwilling to break his promise to stay. Finally, the doctor straightened up with a satisfied nod. "You're dehydrated and exhausted, Mrs. Blackburn, but otherwise in remarkably good condition given what you've been through. The baby appears to be healthy as well. I'd estimate you're about 7 months along." Relief washed over Julia's face. "Thank God. You'll need plenty of rest and fluids. I recommend you stay here in town until after the birth. Travel would be inadvisable in your condition, especially given the dangers on the roads." Julia's expression fell. "I have no money, doctor. Everything I had was in my trunk on the stagecoach." Dr. Pearson waved a dismissive hand. "We'll sort that out later. For now, you need rest. There's a boarding house down the street run by Mrs. Holloway. She's a good woman, takes in those in need from time to time. I can cover her board," Owen said suddenly, surprising himself as much as the others. "At least until she's back on her feet." Julia turned to him, eyes wide. "Mr. Young, I couldn't possibly. It's no trouble," he insisted. "I just finished a cattle drive. Got more than enough to spare." Dr. Pearson nodded approvingly. "That's settled then. Mrs. Blackburn will stay at the boarding house, and I'll check on her daily. He turned to Julia. I'd like to keep you here for a few hours for observation. Then Mr. Young can escort you to Mrs. Holloway's place. As the doctor busied himself preparing a tonic for Julia, Owen finally stepped closer to the examination table. You sure you're all right? Julia nodded, her eyes meeting his. Thanks to you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time, Owen said modestly. Any news on your husband? Was he on the stagecoach with you? A shadow passed over Julia's face. No. Richard died 3 months ago. Typhoid. I was traveling to San Francisco to stay with my sister. I'm sorry for your loss, Owen said sincerely. Julia's hand moved absently to her belly. This baby is all I have left of him now. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when Dr. Pearson returned with a glass containing a murky liquid. Drink this, Mrs. Blackburn. It will help restore your strength. As Julia sipped the medicine, grimacing at the taste, Owen put his hat back on. I'll go arrange things with Mrs. Holloway and see to Samson. Be back in a couple of hours. Julia caught his eye as he turned to leave. Thank you, Mr. Young, for everything. Owen tipped his hat slightly. Owen, please. And you're welcome, Mrs. Blackburn. Julia, she corrected with a small smile. Julia, he repeated, the name feeling strangely right on his lips. With a nod to the doctor, Owen stepped out into the fading light of day, his thoughts still on the woman he'd found in the desert and the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. The next few days established a rhythm that Owen found unexpectedly comfortable. Each morning, he would check on Julia at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house before heading out to look for work. Copperwood, primarily a mining town, always needed strong backs for various tasks, and Owen found himself taking odd jobs that kept him close by. Evenings were spent in the boarding house's small parlor, where he and Julia would talk as she gradually regained her strength. Mrs. Holloway, a plump widow with a no-nonsense attitude and a kind heart, had taken an immediate liking to Julia and fussed over her like a mother hen. She'd provided Julia with some second-hand clothing that could accommodate her growing belly and made sure she ate properly at every meal. That child needs meat on its bones before it comes into this world, Mrs. Holloway declared on the third evening, setting down a plate piled high with beef stew in front of Julia. And so do you, my dear. You're still too thin by half. Julia smiled gratefully. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. Nonsense, the older woman replied. Having you here is payment enough. Been too quiet in this house since my boarders moved on to the new Silver Strike up north. She cast a sly glance at Owen. Besides, your presence has improved the company around here considerably. Owen felt a hint of warmth creep into his cheeks. The company was just fine before I came along, Mrs. Holloway. The landlady merely chuckled and bustled back to the kitchen, leaving Owen and Julia alone in the small dining room. She likes you, Julia observed, blowing gently on a spoonful of stew. Mrs. Holloway? She tolerates me because I pay on time and don't track mud into her house. Julia laughed softly. That's not what I meant, and you know it. She thinks you're a good man. So do I. Owen shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He wasn't accustomed to praise, especially from a woman as refined as Julia. Despite her current circumstances, it was clear she came from a genteel background. Her speech, her manners, even the way she held herself spoke of an upbringing far removed from the rough and tumble world he inhabited. How are you feeling today? He asked, changing the subject. Julia allowed the diversion. Better. Dr. Pearson says I'm recovering well. The baby has been quite active. She placed a hand on her belly. Would you like to feel? The question caught Owen off guard. I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition, Julia assured him, reaching for his hand. Before he could protest, she placed it gently on the curve of her stomach. For a moment, there was nothing. Then Owen felt a distinct movement beneath his palm. His eyes widened in wonder. That's something, isn't it? He said, voice hushed with awe. Julia smiled, watching his face. Yes, it is. Richard never got to feel the baby move. He died before I was showing much. Owen carefully withdrew his hand, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. I'm sorry. It must be difficult, facing this alone. It was, Julia admitted. But I'm not alone anymore, am I? The question hung in the air between them, laden with meaning that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. "No," Owen finally replied. "You're not alone." The next morning, Owen was up before dawn. He had secured work at the livery stable, caring for the horses and making repairs to the corral fence. As he worked, his thoughts continually drifted to Julia and their conversation from the night before. He wasn't looking for attachments. After the war, Owen had drifted westward, finding work where he could and avoiding anything that might tie him down. He'd seen too much death, too much loss to risk his heart again. And yet, there was something about Julia that made him reconsider his solitary existence. Wool-gathering young? The voice of Sam Harris, the livery owner, broke into Owen's thoughts. "Just thinking, Sam." The older man chuckled. "About that pretty widow at Mrs. Holloway's, I'd wager." Owen drove a nail into the fence post with perhaps more force than necessary. "News travels fast in this town." "Small pond, big fish," Sam replied with a shrug. "Besides, it's not every day a man rides in carrying a half-dead pregnant woman. Makes folks curious." "Well, they can stay curious," Owen said firmly. "Mrs. Blackburn deserves her privacy." Sam held up his hands in a placating gesture. "No argument here. Just saying what you already know people talk. And they're saying you seem mighty taken with the widow." Owen set down his hammer. "She's alone and expecting. I'm just helping out until she's back on her feet." Sam hummed skeptically. "And that's why you've been turning down jobs that would take you out of town? Because you're just helping out?" Owen had no good answer for that. It was true he declined 2 offers for work on nearby ranches. Work that paid better than what he was doing now. "Got my reasons," he muttered, picking up the hammer again. Sam clapped him on the shoulder. "Sure you do, son. And they're sitting right there at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house." As Owen continued his work, Sam's words echoed in his mind. Was he developing feelings for Julia? And if so, what was he going to do about it? She was a widow, still grieving for her husband, with a baby on the way. And he was, well, he was just a drifter with nothing much to offer a woman like her. Later that afternoon, Owen was finishing up at the livery when he spotted Dr. Pearson hurrying down the street toward Mrs. Holloway's. Alarm shot through him, and without thinking, he dropped his tools and jogged after the physician. "Doc," he called. "Everything all right?" "Dr." Pearson turned, waiting for Owen to catch up. "Mrs. Holloway sent for me. Said Mrs. Blackburn was having some discomfort." Fear gripped Owen's heart. "The baby? Probably nothing serious," the doctor assured him. "At 7 months, some discomfort is to be expected, but better safe than sorry." They reached the boarding house together, where Mrs. Holloway was waiting anxiously at the door. "She's upstairs, doctor. Started having pains about an hour ago. Says they're not regular, but they worried her." Dr. Pearson nodded and headed upstairs, medical bag in hand. Owen remained in the entryway, hat in hand, unsure of what to do. "You can wait in the parlor," Mrs. Holloway told him, her expression softening at the concern evident on his face. "I'll bring you some coffee." Owen paced the small parlor for what felt like hours, though in reality, it was less than 30 minutes before Dr. Pearson came back downstairs. "False alarm," the doctor announced with a relieved smile. "Braxton Hicks contractions perfectly normal at this stage. I've advised her to rest for the remainder of the day, but there's no cause for concern." Owen released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Can I see her?" Dr. Pearson exchanged a knowing look with Mrs. Holloway. "She's asking for you, actually." Taking the stairs 2 at a time, Owen paused outside Julia's door, suddenly uncertain. He knocked softly. "Come in," Julia's voice called. She was sitting up in bed, propped against several pillows, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Despite the recent scare, she looked calm, even managing a smile when she saw him. "Owen, you didn't have to rush over. Saw the doc heading this way," he explained, hovering awkwardly near the door. "Wanted to make sure everything was all right." "Everything's fine," she assured him, patting the edge of the bed in invitation. "Just my body practicing for the real thing, apparently." Owen approached cautiously and perched on the edge of the mattress. "Gave us all quite a scare." "Us?" Julia asked, a teasing light in her eyes. "Mrs. Holloway, the doc." "Me," Owen admitted. "Thought for a moment you might be having that baby early." Julia's hand found his, her fingers cool against his calloused palm. "Not yet, though Dr. Pearson says it could be sooner than we thought." He's adjusted his estimate, thinks I might be closer to 8 months along than 7. Owen nodded, acutely aware of her hand in his. That's good news, isn't it? Less waiting. Yes and no, Julia replied, her expression growing serious. I'd hoped to reach San Francisco before the birth. My sister is expecting me. Have you written to her? Let her know what happened. Julia nodded. Mrs. Holloway helped me compose a letter yesterday. It should reach her in a week or so, but there's no way I can travel now, not with the baby coming so soon. You'll stay here then? In Copperwood. For the time being, at least. Julia studied his face. Unless you think I should try to move on? The question caught Owen by surprise. No. I mean, Copperwood's as good a place as any to have a baby. Doc Pearson knows his business, and Mrs. Holloway seems happy to have you here. And you? Julia asked softly. Are you happy to have me here, Owen? The directness of her question left him momentarily speechless. In that moment, looking into her eyes, Owen realized he couldn't lie not to her, and not to himself. Yes, he said simply. I am. A slow smile spread across Julia's face, lighting up her eyes. Good. Because I've grown rather accustomed to your company, Mr. Young. Owen felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. Have you now? Indeed I have. You're not like other men I've known. There's a gentleness to you, despite your rough exterior. Owen looked down at their joined hands. War changes a man. Makes him appreciate the softer things in life, I suppose. You fought? Julia asked, though it wasn't really a question. Confederate cavalry. For years that felt like 40. Owen rarely spoke of his time in the war, but with Julia, the words came easier than expected. Saw things no man should have to see. Did things I'm not proud of. We all have regrets, Julia said softly. Things we wish we could change. Owen looked up, meeting her gaze. What do you regret, Julia Blackburn? She was quiet for a long moment, her free hand absently stroking her belly. I regret not telling Richard how much I loved him, every day that we had together. I regret the quarrels over small things that seemed so important at the time. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I regret that our child will never know its father. Owen squeezed her hand gently. You'll tell the little one about him. Keep his memory alive. Yes, Julia agreed. But it's not the same, is it? A child needs more than stories. The unspoken implication hung in the air between them. Before Owen could respond, Mrs. Holloway's voice called up the stairs. Mr. Young, there's a telegram for you. Owen reluctantly released Julia's hand. I should see what that's about. Of course, Julia nodded. Will you come back later? Try and stop me. Owen replied with a small smile before heading downstairs. Mrs. Holloway handed him the telegram with a curious expression. Boy from the telegraph office brought it over. Said it was urgent. Owen opened the folded paper, his expression darkening as he read the brief message. Bad news. Mrs. Holloway asked. Cattle rustlers hit the Henderson place, just outside of Tucson, Owen explained. John Henderson's an old friend. His son was injured in the raid. Oh, how terrible. Will the boy be all right? Doesn't say. John's asking if I can come help track the rustlers. Says the local law isn't doing much. Mrs. Holloway's gaze drifted toward the stairs. And will you go? Owen folded the telegram and tucked it into his pocket. I don't know. John's a good man. Helped me when I first came out west. I owe him. But, Mrs. Holloway prompted gently. Owen sighed. But I don't want to leave. Not now. The older woman patted his arm sympathetically. She'll understand if you need to go, you know. Mrs. Blackburn is many things, but selfish isn't one of them. That's what worries me, Owen admitted. She'll tell me to go even if she'd rather I stayed. Then perhaps you need to decide what you want, Mr. Young. Mrs. Holloway gave him a knowing look. And perhaps it's time you told her how you feel. Owen spent a restless night weighing his options. By morning, he had made his decision. After breakfast, he made his way to the telegraph office and sent a message to John Henderson, explaining that he couldn't come immediately but would try to arrive within a month. It was a compromise that sat uneasily with him, neither fully honoring his debt to his old friend nor completely committing to his growing feelings for Julia. When he returned to the boarding house, he found Julia in the small garden behind the building, seated on a bench beneath an apple tree. The morning sun filtered through the leaves, dappling her face with light and shadow. She looked up as he approached, a book open in her lap. Good morning, She greeted him with a smile that faltered slightly as she noted his serious expression. Is everything all right? Owen sat beside her on the bench. Got a telegram yesterday. From a friend near Tucson. He's in some trouble. Asked for my help. Oh. Julia's face fell slightly, though she quickly composed herself. You're leaving then? Not right away, Owen replied. Told him I'd try to come in a few weeks. A few weeks, Julia repeated, her hand moving to her belly. The baby will likely be here by then. That's what I was thinking. Julia studied his face. You feel guilty for not going to your friend immediately. Owen nodded. John Henderson gave me work when no one else would. Taught me ranching. I owe him a lot. Then perhaps you should go, Julia said softly. I'll be fine here. Mrs. Holloway and Dr. Pearson will look after me. Owen turned to face her fully. That's just it, Julia. I don't want to leave you. Not now. Maybe not ever. The confession hung in the air between them, more revealing than Owen had intended. Julia's eyes widened slightly, her lips parting in surprise. Owen, I know it's too soon, he rushed on. Your husband's only been gone a few months, and you're expecting his child. I have no right to say these things to you. But meeting you, it changed something in me. Made me think about putting down roots, having a real home. Something I haven't thought about since before the war. Julia reached out, her fingers gently touching his cheek. You have every right to say what's in your heart, and I would be lying if I said I hadn't felt a connection between us. Hope surged in Owen's chest. You have. Yes, she admitted. But you're right, it is complicated. I'm still grieving for Richard, and I have this little one to think about. She glanced down at her rounded belly. Any decisions I make affect more than just me now. Owen covered her hand with his own. I understand. I'm not asking for promises, Julia. Just, don't send me away yet. Julia's expression softened. I wouldn't dream of it. I need you here, Owen. More than I care to admit. The admission warmed him from the inside out. Then I'll stay? At least until the baby comes. And after? Julia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. After? Owen echoed. We'll figure that out together. If you're willing. Julia's answer was a gentle squeeze of his hand and a smile that held both promise and caution. It was enough for now, a beginning, tentative though it might be. The weeks that followed were filled with preparations for the baby's arrival. Mrs. Holloway, having raised 5 children of her own, proved an invaluable source of advice and practical help. She and Julia spent hours sewing tiny garments and preparing a corner of Julia's room for the new arrival. Owen, meanwhile, put his carpentry skills to use, crafting a small cradle, working on it in the evenings after his day's labor was done. As July turned to August, the summer heat intensified, making Julia increasingly uncomfortable. Her ankles swelled, her back ached constantly, and sleep became elusive. Despite her discomfort, her spirits remained high, especially when Owen was around. Their relationship developed slowly, respectfully. Owen was careful not to press his feelings upon her, content with the quiet evenings they spent together on the boarding house porch, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood in Georgia, his years in the war, and his aimless wandering afterward. In turn, she shared stories of her life in St. Louis, her marriage to Richard, and their dreams of starting fresh in California. He was a good man, Julia said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Kind, hardworking. He would have been a wonderful father. Owen nodded, feeling no jealousy toward the man Julia had loved. I'm sure he would have been. Sometimes I feel guilty, she admitted, her voice low, for finding happiness here, with you, as if I'm somehow betraying his memory. Owen turned to face her. Do you think he would want you to be alone? To never find joy again? Julia considered this. No, Richard wasn't the jealous type. He would want me to be happy, to find someone who would care for me and the baby. And have you? Owen asked, his heart pounding. Found someone, I mean. Julia's eyes met his, warm and full of emotion. I believe I have. If he'll have us a widow and another man's child. Owen reached for her hand. Julia, His words were cut short as Julia suddenly gasped, her free hand flying to her belly. Oh, what is it? The baby. Julia nodded, her face a mixture of surprise and discomfort. I think it might be time. Owen was on his feet in an instant. I'll get Mrs. Holloway and send for the doctor. The next 12 hours were the longest of Owen's life. Barred from Julia's room while she labored, he paced the boarding house parlor like a caged animal, flinching at every cry that echoed down the stairs. Mrs. Holloway bustled between the bedroom and the kitchen, carrying basins of water and clean linens, her expression revealing nothing about Julia's progress. Other boarders, a middle-aged schoolteacher and an elderly prospector, offered awkward words of encouragement before retreating to their rooms, leaving Owen alone with his thoughts and fears. What if something went wrong? Childbirth was dangerous. Everyone knew that. Women died in labor every day, even with the best medical care. And what about the baby? Would it be healthy? Would Julia allow him to be part of their lives if it was? These questions tormented Owen as the hours crept by. When dawn finally broke, he was slumped in an armchair, exhausted from worry and lack of sleep. The sound of footsteps on the stairs roused him, and he looked up to see Dr. Pearson descending, medical bag in hand. Owen was on his feet immediately. "Doc, how are they?" Dr. Pearson's tired face broke into a smile. "Mother and daughter are doing just fine, Owen. It was a long labor, but Julia is strong. She did remarkably well." "Daughter," Owen repeated, a sense of wonder washing over him. "It's a girl?" "A beautiful, healthy girl with a fine set of lungs," the doctor confirmed. "Julia's asking for you." Owen hesitated. "Is it appropriate?" Dr. Pearson chuckled. "I'd say you're well past worrying about what's appropriate, young man. Go on up. They're waiting for you." Taking the stairs two at a time, Owen paused outside Julia's door, suddenly nervous. He knocked softly. "Come in," Mrs. Holloway called. Owen entered to find the room transformed. The curtains were drawn back, allowing the morning sunlight to fill the space. The air smelled of soap and something else, something new and indescribable. And there, propped up against the pillows, was Julia, her face tired but radiant, cradling a small bundle wrapped in a white blanket. Mrs. Holloway patted his arm as she passed. "I'll leave you three alone," she said with a knowing smile, closing the door behind her. Owen approached the bed slowly, his eyes fixed on the tiny face visible amid the blanket folds. "She's perfect," he whispered. Julia looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears and joy. "Would you like to hold her?" Owen hesitated. "I've never held a baby before. What if I do it wrong?" "You won't," Julia assured him. "Here, sit beside me." Owen carefully settled on the edge of the bed, and Julia placed the tiny bundle in his arms, showing him how to support the baby's head. The infant squirmed slightly, her tiny fists waving in the air before she settled again, eyes closed in sleep. "She's so light," Owen marveled. "Like holding a bird." Julia smiled, watching them together. "She needs a name." "I was thinking, Elizabeth, after my mother." "Elizabeth," Owen repeated, testing the name. "It's beautiful. Suits her." "Elizabeth and Blackburn," Julia said. Then, after a pause, "Unless." Owen looked up from the baby's face. "Unless." Julia took a deep breath. "Unless someday, she might have another name. A different last name." The implication of her words sent Owen's heart racing. "Julia, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I know it's forward of me," Julia said, a blush coloring her cheeks. "And perhaps too soon. But these past weeks with you, I've come to care for you deeply, Owen. More than I thought possible after losing Richard." Owen carefully handed the baby back to Julia, then took her free hand in both of his. "Julia Blackburn, I've been half in love with you since I found you in the desert. And fully in love with you for weeks now. If you'll have me, I'd be honored to give little Elizabeth my name and to be a father to her in every way that matters." Tears spilled from Julia's eyes. "Are you certain? Taking on another man's child is no small thing." "She's your daughter," Owen said simply. "That's all that matters to me. I'll love her as my own, I swear it." Julia's smile was radiant through her tears. "Then yes, Owen Young. Yes, I will marry you." Owen leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on Julia's lips there first before pressing another to Elizabeth's forehead. In that moment, he knew he had found what he'd been searching for since the war ended. A home, a family, a future filled with love and purpose. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in Copperwood's small church. Julia, fully recovered from childbirth, wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Holloway had helped her alter for the occasion. Elizabeth, dressed in a christening gown that had once belonged to Mrs. Holloway's own children, slept peacefully in the arms of the schoolteacher, who had volunteered to hold her during the ceremony. Owen, in a new shirt and his freshly brushed Sunday coat, waited at the altar with nervous anticipation. Dr. Pearson stood beside him as best man, offering quiet words of encouragement as they waited for the bride. When Julia appeared at the back of the church, a bouquet of wildflowers in her hands, Owen felt his breath catch. She was radiant, her dark hair arranged in soft curls around her face, her eyes finding his immediately. As she walked toward him, escorted by the elderly prospector who had insisted on giving her away, Owen knew with absolute certainty that this was where he belonged. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged simple vows and rings that Owen had purchased with his savings. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the small congregation consisting mainly of boarding house residents and townsfolk who had come to know and like the couple erupted in applause. At the modest reception held at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, Dr. Pearson raised a toast to the newlyweds. "To Owen and Julia Young," he said, his voice carrying across the parlor. "May your lives together be as extraordinary as the circumstances that brought you to each other." Later, as they shared their first dance in the cleared space of Mrs. Holloway's dining room, Julia leaned close to Owen's ear. "I've just realized something," she whispered. "What's that, Mrs. Young?" Owen asked, still savoring the sound of her new name. "If you hadn't found me that day in the desert, if you had taken a different route or passed by just an hour later." "Don't think about that," Owen said, tightening his arm around her waist. "Some things are meant to be, Julia. I believe that now." Julia rested her head against his shoulder. "As do I. It's as if my whole life was leading me to that moment, to you." As the evening drew to a close, Owen and Julia retired to the small house they had rented on the edge of town. It wasn't much, 2 rooms with simple furnishings, but it was theirs. Elizabeth's cradle, the one Owen had crafted with his own hands, stood beside their bed, the baby already asleep within it. "Welcome home," Owen said softly as he carried Julia across the threshold. "Home," Julia repeated, her arms around his neck. "I never thought I'd feel at home again after Richard died. Thank you for proving me wrong." Owen set her gently on her feet, his hands lingering at her waist. "Thank you for giving me a family. I never thought I'd have one of my own." Their kiss was tender, full of promise and shared dreams. As they stood together in the gentle glow of the oil lamp, the baby sleeping peacefully nearby, Owen knew that his days of wandering were over. He had found his place in the world, not in a location, but in the hearts of the woman and child who were now his family. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of joyful challenges. Elizabeth grew from a tiny, helpless infant into a curious, crawling explorer with Julia's dark eyes and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. Owen took to fatherhood with natural ease, his large hands gentle as they cradled the baby, his deep voice soothing as he sang her to sleep with old lullabies from his childhood. Julia thrived as well, her natural grace and intelligence earning her the respect of the townspeople. When the schoolteacher announced her intention to return east, Julia was the natural choice to replace her. 3 days a week, she taught the children of Copperwood their letters and numbers, with little Elizabeth contentedly playing in a corner of the schoolroom. Owen, meanwhile, had partnered with Sam Harris at the livery stable, investing his savings in the business. Under their joint management, the livery expanded to include a blacksmith shop and tack repair service, becoming one of the most prosperous businesses in town. They had fulfilled Owen's promise to John Henderson, too. In the fall after their wedding, they had traveled to Tucson, where Owen helped his old friend track down the rustlers who had raided his ranch. John's son had recovered from his injuries, and the reunion of the two families had been joyous. John had taken an immediate liking to Julia and had declared Elizabeth the prettiest little cowgirl in the territory as he bounced her on his knee. As Elizabeth's first birthday approached, Julia began to notice subtle changes in Owen. He seemed preoccupied, often staring thoughtfully into the distance during meals or while playing with Elizabeth. At first, Julia attributed it to the pressures of the growing business, but when she found him studying land maps late one night, she knew something else was brewing. "Are you planning a surprise, Mr. Young?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind as he sat at their small kitchen table. Owen started slightly, then relaxed into her embrace. "Can't keep anything from you, can I?" Julia rested her chin on his shoulder. Not for long. What are you plotting? Owen turned in his chair to face her, pulling her onto his lap. I've been thinking about our future. Elizabeth's getting bigger, and this house won't be enough if our family grows. Julia smiled, her hand moving to her still flat stomach. Are you saying you want more children, Owen? I'm saying I want everything with you, Julia. A bigger home, more children, land of our own. He gestured to the map spread on the table. There's a parcel available just outside of town. Good water, decent grazing land. Enough to start a small ranch. Julia studied the map. You want to be a rancher? I've been saving every penny from the livery partnership, Owen explained. Sam's nephew is coming out from Missouri next month, bright young man with a head for business. Sam suggested I might sell my share to him, use the money to buy the land. And is that what you want? Julia asked, searching his face. To leave the livery and start ranching? Owen nodded slowly. I think so. I've worked cattle most of my adult life. It's what I know best. And the idea of building something, a legacy for Elizabeth and any brothers or sisters she might have. It feels right. Julia's eyes shone with understanding and love. Then that's what we'll do. Together. Owen's face broke into a relieved smile. You're sure? It won't be easy at first. We'll need to build a proper house, fences, a barn. It's a big undertaking. Owen Young, Julia said, framing his face with her hands. When you found me in the desert, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the baby in my belly. Look at us now. I'd say we're quite good at building something from nothing. Owen kissed her then, a kiss full of gratitude and love and shared dreams. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Julia Young. More every day. And I love you, she whispered back. Now, tell me more about this land of ours. They stayed up late into the night, planning their future together. By the time they finally went to bed, the outline of their dream was clear. A modest ranch where they would raise cattle and children, a place that would grow and flourish alongside their family. 2 weeks later, Owen finalized the purchase of the land, 160 acres of promising terrain with a small creek running through it. The previous owner, an elderly prospector who had given up on striking it rich, had built a rudimentary cabin that would serve as their temporary home, while Owen constructed something more substantial. News of their plans spread quickly through Copperwood. On the day they prepared to move their belongings to the new property, they were surprised by the arrival of a procession of wagons and riders. Sam Harris led the group, which included Dr. Pearson, Mrs. Holloway, and a dozen other townsfolk. What's all this? Owen asked, stepping out onto the porch of their small house. Sam dismounted with a grin. Thought you could use some help getting settled, neighbor. Julia appeared beside Owen, Elizabeth on her hip. You all came to help us move? Not just move, Mrs. Holloway said, climbing down from one of the wagons. We've come to help you build. Every new homestead needs a proper barn raising. Owen was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the generosity of the community they had become part of. I don't know what to say, he finally managed. Dr. Pearson clapped him on the shoulder. No need to say anything. Just put us to work. I hear you've got ambitious plans for that property. And work they did. Over the next 3 days, the group transformed the raw land into the beginnings of a proper ranch. The men constructed a sturdy barn while the women organized the cabin and planted a vegetable garden. By the time the impromptu work party dispersed, the young family had a functional, if modest, ranch to call their own. I can't believe how much they did. Julia marveled as she and Owen stood on the porch of the cabin that evening, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson. Elizabeth was already asleep inside, exhausted from the excitement of the move. That's the West for you, Owen said, his arm around her waist. People understand that no one makes it alone out here. Julia leaned against him. We're blessed to have found such friends. And each other, Owen added softly. Don't forget that part. Julia turned in his arms to face him. I never could. Finding you was the miracle that made everything else possible. As darkness fell over their new home, Owen and Julia stood together, contemplating the future they would build. The land stretched before them, full of promise and possibility, much like the life they had created together from the most unlikely of beginnings. 5 years passed, transforming both the land and the family that worked it. The Young Ranch, as it came to be known, flourished under Owen's careful management. What had begun as a modest operation with a dozen head of cattle had grown to a respectable herd of over 100, with plans for further expansion. The rudimentary cabin had given way to a proper ranch house, built by Owen with help from neighbors and hired hands. It stood proudly on a small rise overlooking the property, a two-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around three sides, large windows to catch the breeze, and enough bedrooms to accommodate their growing family. For Elizabeth, now 6 years old, had been joined by a brother, Thomas, who at 4 years of age was already determined to follow in his father's footsteps. And the family had grown again just 8 months prior with the arrival of Sarah, a peaceful baby with Owen's blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair like her mother's. Life had settled into a pleasant rhythm for the young family. Owen managed the ranch with the help of 2 hired hands, while Julia divided her time between caring for the children and continuing to teach at the Copperwood School 2 days a week. Their home was often filled with visitors, neighbors, friends from town, and occasionally travelers passing through who had heard of the Youngs' hospitality. On this particular evening in late spring of 1879, the family was gathered on the porch after supper. Owen sat in a rocking chair whittling a small wooden horse for Thomas, while Julia mended one of Elizabeth's dresses. The children played a game of their own invention in the yard, their laughter carrying on the gentle breeze. "Papa, look," Elizabeth called, pointing to a distant dust cloud on the horizon. "Riders coming." Owen set aside his whittling and stood, shading his eyes against the setting sun. "So there are 3, maybe 4 of them." Julia rose as well, Sarah cradled in one arm. "Are we expecting anyone?" "Not that I recall," Owen replied, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver he kept holstered at his hip, a habit from years on the frontier that he had never fully abandoned. As the riders drew closer, Owen relaxed slightly. "That's Sam Harris in the lead," he told Julia, "and I believe that's Dr. Pearson with him." Julia smiled. "A social call, then. How lovely." The 4 riders, Sam, Dr. Pearson, and 2 men Owen didn't immediately recognize, reined in their horses at the front of the house. Sam raised his hat in greeting. "Evening, Youngs. Hope we're not intruding." "Not at all," Owen replied warmly, stepping off the porch to greet their visitors. "You know you're always welcome, Sam." As the men dismounted, Sam made introductions. "Owen, Julia, these gentlemen are Mr. James Wilson and Mr. Frederick Parker from the Arizona Territorial Legislature. They're touring the county, getting to know the constituents." Owen shook hands with the well-dressed men, noting their city clothes and official manner. "Welcome to our home, gentlemen. What brings territorial officials all the way out to our humble ranch?" Wilson, the elder of the 2 and clearly the more senior official, smiled broadly. "Actually, Mr. Young, we're here to see you specifically." Owen raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Me? What business would the legislature have with a simple rancher?" Julia had joined them by now, with Elizabeth and Thomas peering curiously from behind her skirts. Wilson tipped his hat to her. "Mrs. Young, a pleasure. I've heard much about your contributions to the school in Copperwood." "Thank you, Mr. Wilson," Julia replied politely. "But like my husband, I'm curious about the nature of your visit." Sam and Dr. Pearson exchanged knowing glances, and Sam finally spoke up. "Owen, these gentlemen are looking for someone to serve as the new county sheriff. Your name came up in conversation." Owen was momentarily speechless. "Sheriff? Me? There must be some mistake." Parker, the younger official, shook his head. "No mistake, Mr. Young. Your reputation precedes you. Your work helping track down those rustlers for the Henderson Ranch a few years back made quite an impression. And Dr. Pearson here tells us you served with distinction in the war." Owen shot a look at Dr. Pearson, who merely shrugged. "I may have mentioned your cavalry experience," the doctor admitted. "Gentlemen," Owen said firmly, "I appreciate the consideration, but I'm a rancher, not a lawman. I have a family, responsibilities here." Wilson nodded understandingly. "Of course, and we wouldn't want to take you away from all this." He gestured to the well-maintained ranch around them. "But the county needs leadership, Mr. Young. Someone who understands the land and its people. The sheriff's office is in Copperwood, not far from your property. Many of your duties could be managed without significant time away from home." Julia touched Owen's arm lightly. "Perhaps we should invite our guests inside," she suggested. It's getting chilly out here, and this sounds like a conversation that might benefit from some coffee. Owen nodded, grateful for her intervention. Of course. Gentlemen, please come in. As the visitors followed Julia into the house, Owen hung back with Sam. What's this really about? He asked in a low voice. Sam sighed. The county's growing, Owen. The silver strike up north has brought in all sorts of folk, not all of them honest. The current sheriff's getting on in years, can't keep up anymore. They need someone with backbone who won't be bought off by mining interests. And you think that's me? I know it's you, Sam replied confidently. So does everyone else who knows you. Inside, Julia had settled the visitors in the comfortable parlor and sent Elizabeth to fetch coffee. Thomas had been put to bed, and Sarah dozed peacefully in a cradle by the fireplace. As the men discussed the details of the position duties, compensation, term of office, Julia watched her husband carefully. She knew Owen well enough to see that beneath his initial reluctance, something in the proposal had caught his interest. There was a thoughtful set to his jaw, a considering look in his eyes that she recognized from past decisions. Later, after their guests had departed with a promise from Owen to consider the offer, Julia found him on the porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. You're thinking about accepting, she said, coming to stand beside him. Owen glanced at her, a small smile playing at his lips. Am I that transparent? Only to me, Julia replied, taking his hand. And only because I know how much you value doing what's right. Owen sighed, squeezing her fingers gently. The idea of being sheriff never crossed my mind. But the way Wilson described it, bringing order, protecting folks who are just trying to build a life out here, it reminded me of why I came west in the first place. To be part of something that matters. You already are part of something that matters, Julia reminded him, gesturing toward the house where their children slept. But I understand the pull of a larger purpose. Owen turned to face her fully. I won't do it without your blessing, Julia. This affects all of us. If you think it's too risky, or that I'd be away from home too much, Owen. Julia interrupted softly, placing her hand against his cheek. When I agreed to marry you, I knew I wasn't getting a man who would be content to plow the same field every day for 40 years. You have a restlessness in you, a need to stand for something. It's one of the things I love about you. So you think I should accept? Julia considered for a moment. I think you should do what you believe is right. And I think you already know what that is. Owen smiled, pulling her into his arms. What did I do to deserve you, Julia Young? You gave water to a pregnant woman in the desert, she replied, her eyes twinkling in the moonlight. And then you loved her daughter as your own. Best decisions I ever made. Owen murmured, bending to kiss her. 3 weeks later, Owen Young was sworn in as the sheriff of Copperwood County. The ceremony, held on the steps of the small courthouse in town, was attended by nearly everyone in the county. Julia stood proudly at his side, Sarah in her arms, with Elizabeth and Thomas watching wide-eyed as their father pinned on the silver star. That evening, as they drove the wagon home to the ranch, Elizabeth asked the question that had been on her mind all day. Papa, now that you're the sheriff, will you have to shoot bad men? Owen glanced at Julia, then turned in his seat to face his daughter. Being sheriff isn't about shooting people, Elizabeth. It's about making sure everyone follows the rules so that we can all live together peacefully. But what if someone doesn't follow the rules? Thomas piped up from where he sat between his parents. Owen considered his answer carefully. Then I try to help them understand why the rules matter. And if that doesn't work, I make sure they face the consequences of their actions. Like when Mama makes me sit in the corner when I'm naughty? Thomas asked. Julia laughed softly. Something like that, yes. As they approached the ranch, the setting sun bathed the house and barn in golden light. Owen felt a surge of gratitude for this life he had built, for the family that had grown from the most unexpected of beginnings. I was thinking, he said as he helped Julia down from the wagon, that we might invite Sam and Dr. Pearson out for Sunday dinner, to thank them for their part in all this. Julia smiled, handing Sarah to him as she gathered her skirts. That sounds wonderful. Mrs. Holloway too, perhaps? She's been asking to see the baby again. Of course, Owen agreed, cradling his youngest child against his chest. Family should be together for celebrations. Julia paused, her eyes softening as she looked at him. Family, she repeated. I never imagined, that day in the desert, that I would find not just rescue but a whole new life. A whole new family. Owen leaned down to kiss her gently. Fate has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? I set out that morning looking for nothing more than a route to Copperwood. Instead, I found everything I never knew I was searching for. As they walked together toward the house, their children running ahead with excited chatter about their father's new position, Owen reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a chance encounter in the desert to a life rich with love, purpose, and connection, it was more than he had ever dared to hope for. The stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky as the young family entered their home, closing the door on the day and opening it to whatever adventures tomorrow might bring. For Owen and Julia, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced everything since that fateful day in the desert together, with courage, love, and an unwavering faith in each other. And as night fell over the young ranch, the story that had begun with a desperate rescue in the desert continued to unfold, a testament to the transformative power of compassion, the enduring strength of love, and the beautiful unpredictability of life in the American West.